Okay, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this jobs.ac.uk webinar, which is being offered in partnership with Women's Space. The topic today is overcoming barriers and challenges for women in universities. And we are really delighted that all of you have joined us today and that we have this opportunity for a conversation with some really wonderful women leaders and with all of you. I'm Dana Brown. I'm the Dean of the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, which is based here in Ottawa, and I'm going to be chairing today's session. And over to you, Christina.
Thanks, Dana. So, hi, I'm Christina Hughes. I'm the founder and chief executive of Women's Space, and I'll be co-chairing today. And as Dana has said, our webinar is sets out to address the barriers that women face in university and those challenges. We've got a stellar panel of very experienced women leaders drawn from the best in Canada. And together we're going to explore those challenges that many women face, how to overcome them, and how to empower women to move forward in their careers. So lots of hints and tips on the way. Okay, Dana, back to you.
That's great. Well, now that we've introduced the topic, I think we're going to introduce ourselves a little bit, just to say a few words about myself. As I said, I'm the Dean of the Business School at Carleton University here in Ottawa. I have been working in university leadership positions for the past 15 years, and mostly across Europe and the UK. So this role is not new to me. I've served in other deanships in the past. I'm also a professor of international business, and I am an entrepreneur within my institutions. I like to push the boundaries of how we think about business education and education in our communities more generally. I'm a mom. I have 3 daughters and a husband, and we live here in Ottawa. So that's me. And Christina, how about you?
I, as well as being founder and chief exec of Women's Space, which I set up because I've had a long experience of working in universities and have experienced and can see all the challenges that women face. So Women's Space is designed to support women to flourish. I'm a professor of women and gender, and I've held executive roles in 3 universities. I was Pro-Vice Chancellor at the University of Warwick, Provost at Sheffield Hallam, and Deputy Vice Chancellor at Kent. My children are all grown up. I've actually got grandchildren, and the parent to the most fabulous dog called Mabel. So Dana, back to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I just want to note that our 3 wonderful panelists today are all deans in Canada, and we have all been part of a network of women deans across the country we started to meet in 2019, and when the pandemic hit, we realized that having a network of support and guidance amongst us would be really beneficial. And we have been meeting and talking every 2 weeks since the start of that pandemic in 2020. So for me, I feel extremely fortunate to have gotten to know these fantastic leaders. There have been ups and downs throughout that period of time, and we've been there for one another, and knowing that has been very meaningful to all of us. So I'm thrilled to welcome our panelists, and I'll let you each introduce yourself. So Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Dana. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Lisa Watson. I'm the Dean of Business at Athabasca University, which is Canada's open university. I'm actually an alumna of Dana's institution, so my first 2 degrees came from there, so I'm an Ottawa girl by hometown. And I now reside in Calgary, Alberta, which is Treaty 7 territory of the Tsuut'ina and Niitsitapi peoples. I have been dean here only for about a year. And before that, I spent 17 years in University of Regina, which is in Saskatchewan, Canada, where I held 2 associate dean positions and was a member of the Faculty of Business and Marketing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. And Rena, over to you.
So hello, everyone. Rena Tanasiadis, the Dean of the Williams School of Business at Bishop's University. located in the province of Quebec, a bilingual environment, but an Anglophone university surrounded by a lot of French, makes for interesting times. Our students come to us from all over the country and around the world, and it's a pleasure to be the academic leader of this institution. So my background, I guess I could describe myself as an accidental academic. I was never a little girl saying that I was going to grow up to be the dean of a school of business. I entered capital markets. That was my career choice in the 90s during a time of deregulation, and quickly moved up in the ranks, started my own hedge fund, sold it, and really looked myself in the mirror and said, "You're too young to retire," and was asked to teach a course. Fell in love, cannot imagine my life now without students, listening. So it is a choice that I've made, got tenure very quickly, and have moved up the ranks in the administration. So when I was offered the position of dean, I jumped all over it. But sincerely, I think that it is an opportunity for us to also speak how the role of education within the bigger context of industry and the impact that we have, starting with things like I am on the unceded territory of the Abenaki people, and we are leaders, for instance, in creating awareness of our Indigenous peoples. And there's so many things that we're going to talk about today. So I am thrilled to be with my friends.
Great. Thank you so much, Rena. Allison?
Thank you. It's this panel session today. I am Allison Yakishin, and I'm here at University of Edmonton in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I am the Dean of the Mahalshin School of Management and also the Interim Dean of the Faculty of Education. So I have a double duty dean role, but it's quite interesting and exciting to be in this position. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm on the land, which I am, is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous people. I look forward to sharing a little bit of my insights with you today with regards to where I am right now, but where I have been and where I'm going. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone for the introduction. For the audience, if you're watching live today and you want to ask us a question, there's a Q&A button at the top of the right-hand side of your Microsoft Teams screen. So click there, ask your question, and some of those questions will be passed on to us. But we are going to start with just a few general questions that we've already received. So I'm going to start by asking Lisa to get us started, to tell us explain a little bit about some of the challenges or barriers you faced along the way in your career as you've kind of progressed and up the ranks, and how have you overcome them?
A great question. Thanks, Dana. I would say I am the classic example of a woman who probably took on too much service in her academic career at the expense of research. So I call myself a little bit of a cliche, if one will. So as an example, right before I was pre-tenure, I was asked to take on 6 different classes in one semester. 2 of them were brand new to me. 1 of them was brand new and had never been taught before. And to my knowledge, they did not ask a male colleague of mine if they would step in and pick up some of this load. I also had a time where I had 6 new faculty members start very shortly after I'd received tenure. And so I felt obligated to take some of that service pressure off. So I took on some very heavy committee work. So making some of those decisions that a male colleague wouldn't necessarily make, I think is something that is, I can say, has been systemic through my career. In terms of how I overcame some of those challenges, though, I would say I didn't so much overcome them as lean into them. And I think it's why I'm a dean today. So the example of those 6 courses that I taught, one of them, in fact, was a case competition driven course. So I ended up really almost single-handedly developing what is now the strongest alumni network on my former university's campus because I brought such strong experiences to those students. All those extra service activities I took on let me touch pretty much every corner, of the deep, dark things that go on at universities. It gave me deep insight to a universe I wouldn't have otherwise had. So I embraced those things. I recognized I was good at those things. I was passionate about those things. And I think that's why I'm a dean today.
I think that's really great. It's really interesting to talk about this service component, because we hear this a lot that, women are asked to do more service, but it's kind of a double-edged sword, because in some sense, we're rising to the top as natural leaders. And so we're called upon to do this service, and it gives us this opportunity to have insights into our university and to bring some unique perspective to the challenges we face. On the other hand, if we are in a traditional institution where the only way to rise up is through a very narrow path, that can really restrict us, going forward. But I wonder, maybe Rena, you could reflect a little bit on that, and also, how do you address that issue as a dean, right? Looking at your female colleagues.
So interestingly, the one common thing that I've encountered, whether it was my career in industry or now in academia, is that, I teach finance, and being an investment banker in the 90s and being female was the equivalent of visiting a prison every day, right? You were surrounded by males, and it was really just a different environment than it is now. It's starting to diversify. But frankly, if we think about our finance faculties worldwide, they are still pretty much male dominated. And to carve out a space was something that I needed to do, whether it was in industry or even in academia. So yes, I did start by teaching, was a contract faculty, became a limited term appointment, an extended term appointment, had tenure, etc. Exactly because of the same reason that Lisa provided, is that I didn't say no. For me, it was an opportunity. And every time they said, fix this. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what they asked of me. It's to fix along the way things that needed to be improved and optimized, right? So you don't say no. And at some point, you find yourself in a position where you're overseeing bigger and more interesting things. What I guess I wanted to point out was that whether it was industry or the university, they had no hesitation, whether it was me or any other, female or someone who is, I know I self-identifies as female, as being a manager. Like, they see us, the world still today doesn't have a hesitation in giving us management responsibilities, but leadership, right? The C-suite, the corner office, etc., is still something that we need to lean in and make ourselves be seen in order to be a contender. And I think that is still something that's in flux, right? I think that we all collectively need to work on.
I think that's really interesting. And I like the way you kind of, you almost are countering the traditional advice that women are given to just start saying no to the opportunities. Well, maybe say yes and lean in, but be strategic, right? About the way you think about those opportunities and where they're going to lead you, what networks you're going to build in doing those. And that insight of manager versus leader, that's incredible, right? What an incredible insight and way of thinking about the barriers that we do hit eventually, right? And that leads me to my next question. I'm going to turn over to Allison to reflect a little bit on, why do you think those barriers to those senior leadership roles still exist in our sector?
It's a great question. And, in reflecting on it, you think that women really still have to survive. And, how do you thrive when you're given opportunity? So this is a profound realization that, even though you may have opportunities that you're available to you, what do you want to do? And also, who's there to support you? Because I think that's a critical piece when we are given opportunities, and you have to make a decision. And it's that survival that it's putting one step in front of the other. So, it's opportunity, but it's also that survival. So in a supportive environment, how do you then thrive? That's an individualistic decisions, choices that we have to make, because we're all unique and we're all different. So we each need to decide, in terms of how do we gain equal footing, we all have different paths. And I think that for me is the journey, where we're all in different institutions, we all work with different people. Some of us are given opportunities in unique ways. And for me, it's sometimes just survival. And then how do you thrive? And others will see you in that role and say, wow, look, they are actually thriving.
Right, right. It's interesting. That's great. And Rena, what do you think about this question about the barriers, right? Why they exist?
Well, so if you break apart how the last 50 years have opened up opportunities. So post, World War II, and how women came into the workforce and went up the ranks. And today we see, the new generation, Gen Zs, the millennials, who are walking, right, on a paved road that was really done by many of us who broke down these barriers. That's the way it should be, right? That's progress, and that's how things move forward. What still remains, though, is this instinct, or this maybe unrealized bias, that society and women do it to women. Like that's the the nerving thing, right? That how do you not hesitate if you're seeing a woman that could fill a role and is not only qualified but meant for it? Why is there that hesitation? And I think it's because of the way we think. So I have realized that every time I was given a promotion, every time I was given an opportunity, right, to move up, my brain went because, wow, how am I going to manage this and this and the other? Who's going to pick up the kids from daycare? I just went through a mental list of everything I needed to do on top of this additional challenge, right? And maybe this is a little simplified, so forgive me if I'm taking a little bit of creative liberty here. But when a gentleman is provided an opportunity, he thinks about it perhaps and says, that is great for my career, and says yes, and then goes home to his or her partner, right, and says, I would like to now have this opportunity, let's make it work. We kind of think out loud and go, yeah, okay, so how does this work, and what are the hours, and do I have to move, right? We have to sell the house, where are the kids going to go to school, and is the dog going to adjust to the new place? Like all of the things that we think about, versus gentlemen sometimes just say, yeah, it's my next move, right? And everything that happens for that to occur is worked out, usually with someone behind them, right, who helps them implement this big challenge. So I think part of it is on us. We need to just look at an opportunity and say, it's mine, baby, because it's mine. Like I own this opportunity, and not necessarily, come across as having all these other challenges that come with accepting that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight, Rena. And if I can build on that a little bit, we hear now, I've been attending a lot of leadership workshops for women in business, and what we're hearing is women are kind of dropping out of some of these leadership roles since the pandemic. And part of the explanation for that is that overthinking of all the things we have to grapple with, right? Because now we add to the list that you just provided the kind of emotional and organizational turmoil that the pandemic actually created for us. So Lisa, I just wondered, what do you think about that? What do you think what do you think of what Rena said about those barriers and what's happening in the workforce today?
Yeah, and I'll preface this, I guess, right away by clarifying, I don't have children, so I have far fewer barriers and issues to think about, and I have a really, really supportive, he's I call him my house husband, actually. So in some ways, I feel like I'm in this reversed role, and I would say, yeah, I mean, I think imposter syndrome is something we haven't raised yet. And, I would say it's far more severe for women. Why should I think I can do this? Relative to anyone else, and it could be a woman. And I know that I've definitely needed those pushes from people like you in my, in my inside circle to take that step in a way that, and again, I watched a male counterpart go, well, of course that, I'm going to be a dean. It's just natural. I'm an associate dean. So doesn't that just mean everybody becomes a dean next? No, nobody. It really doesn't. And there's a lot that goes into it, and it's really hard work. And maybe you should think that through just a little bit before you make assumptions that, you have a right to a position in a way that I don't think most women would ever think. So I think we are also internally needing to get out of our own heads and, stop being our own worst enemies in some ways, and think a little more like a man in terms of building that, just natural internal confidence.
These are really, really good themes, really interesting. I mean, there's another theme I want to just explore a little bit, and maybe Christina, I can ask you to think about this one a little bit, which is about, sometimes in my career, certainly I've been giving two bits of different advice. One is you've got to learn the game, the rules of the game that exist in an institution. Those rules of the game may have been set by male leaders before you. In order to get there, you have to play by those rules. But there's another set of advice that's don't play by those rules, because you'll only get to the top of an institution by being yourself, right? And going about it your own way. And as a leader, you then have this unique opportunity to start to change those rules and stretch them. I find that second path is a challenging path, right? And I just wondered, Christina, what have you found in your career and the big positions you've held?
Yeah, I think this, this is the big political question. And of course, for all of us, we come at it in a different kind of way, to the extent you want to change the world or fit into the world. But often, the critique is that how we approach these things is fixing the woman, fixing her to fit in to the status quo. My experience is it's a bit of both. I think whatever role you take, wherever you are, you become enculturated into that culture and into those ways of being. And a very common story I tell is when I very first used to go to big committee meetings and felt like the squeaky little girl at the end of the table. And then flash forward a few years, and I caught myself guffawing with the blokes. This is a very different embodiment, an absolutely different embodiment, and a different set of confidence, because I spend so long with lots of these chaps, you become a bit like them, and you don't necessarily notice then how your standpoint changes and your politics change and. I think it's a really, really hard question. And my only answer to this is that we have to work out for ourselves where we stand in that binary, and then think how we can play that to the best advantage. So for me, I would always have tried, as much as then I was spreading myself out and, having a guffaw or whatever it is, I would try to act in ways that were a kind of a way in which you can support other women. So absolutely to go out of my way to support other women who can then actually change that balance. Because the more women there are in those spaces, the less we're likely to become like men, simply by hanging around with men for half our lives. Yes. So I do actually think it's a really hard question.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, though. That's really insightful. And it leads me to, some other more nuanced questions, right, about how we work with men in the workplace. For example, if we are encountering overt or covert sexism in the workplace, how do we counter that? And, how do we assert ourselves in ways that don't isolate us from the team? Right, in a way, because very often, as you say, Christina, I think many of us have been the only woman at the table for a while, right? And so there's a striving to fit in, not to isolate, but on the other hand, wanting to ensure that we're working on equal footing and equal terms. So Alison, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that, on how you've addressed some of those issues in the workplace.
Certainly. In terms of overt sexist behaviors, in the workplace, I'm very fortunate to work at Concordia University of Edmonton, where we have a respect in the workplace initiative. And, bullying, abuse, harassment, and discrimination obviously has negative effects. And sometimes those are long-term or on mental, physical, physiological, and, all of these health components. So in bullying and harassment, it's the impact on the victim that matters, not the intent of the aggressor. So there is no such thing as an innocent bystander, and we have to step up and we have to step in when we see or when we hear bullying, abuse, harassment, and discrimination. For any type of, sexist behavior, you have to say that's not appropriate. And, in terms of, even as I just commented, that the respect in the workplace really does matter. So I've done, an online module. I have a certificate. I have it in my office, but I've also noticed how others have as well. And it allows us to have these conversations about what is appropriate and what is not, and how do we change. And it's that cultural shift, that mindset that we really have to be conscious of, so that we can, move the needle in the right direction. I think those are a few thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's great. Rena, any thoughts on that same type of question?
Yeah, I was listening to Alison, and it reminded me that, even as recently, some might say, as 15, 20 years ago, being told as a woman in an executive position or a senior management role, that you're one of the guys was seen as a sign of acceptance. Right? You're one of us, you're one of the majority, you know how to play by our rules, etc. Except we were not part of their network. We weren't invited to a golf game. We certainly weren't part of that social function that they used in order to improve their career, outlooks, etc. So we were one of the guys, but it essentially meant that, if you were around a table deciding something, that you were never really looked at as the person who, might have been the one taking minutes or something, right? Even though you had probably a more senior role than some of the other gentlemen who were sitting around the table. So those times have changed, right? And then there was, of course, the overt sexism and abuse, right, bordering on sexual harassment. Today we call that out. I think today we don't accept that, and I think organizations have regulations in place to at least avoid or preempt those egregious actions. But the stuff that's still inherent, right, in our daily work are those not necessarily egregious or criminal offenses, etc., but those subtle hints that make us behave as wanting to be one of the guys on occasion, right? So that we can be part of that. And we have to check ourselves. Like, we have to make sure that I don't open my door. Like, it's nice to have the door open for me. Maybe I'm a certain age and I think that's a value that I enjoy, but yeah, and I genuinely stop and let whoever it is open the door, either because I am the dean or because it's a gentleman. My parents raised me that way, right? So lean in that way too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. That's really great advice from all of you. Thank you for that. I want to just shift a little bit to thinking about how we do the juggling act in our lives. And I think all of us around the table have very different family situations, very different external interests and priorities. And just wondered if maybe we could just quickly go around the table and talk a little bit about how we juggle both our internal responsibilities of caring for our students, our external responsibilities that we have to family, and then also self-care, which we can't forget about either as an important priority. Are you getting it right? And how are you doing that? Allison?
I'll definitely start. I like this.
You're going to talk about your puppy. I know it.
I have a 10-month-old puppy. Life when, he came into it, about 6 months ago. Top of being a double duty dean, and in terms of all of that, it did hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything's happening all at once. But I have to say, do not feel guilty of your responsibilities, because you have so many different things that are competing for your time, and we all have 24 hours in a day, no matter where we're located. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, but we're all around the world. But we're similar in the fact that you may feel overwhelmed from time to time. And it's okay to be vulnerable, because, in a position of a dean, we shouldn't, be vulnerable. No, I've actually found it's okay. Now, of course, I try to keep my emotions in check, sometimes easier said than done, but it's having conversations with others, such as amazing panelists on this call today, where you can talk truthfully, honestly about what is going on. And when you have people like that in your life, that allows you to talk about, the state that you're in. And, it will shift, it will change. And, I'll talk about other strategies, but, I really think that, having a balance where, yes, I have family responsibilities, but the biggest game changer has been that I'm walking more than 15,000 steps a day because of this puppy. So I have a lot of conversations with him, because, I'm seizing the opportunity to do so. But again, having that balance, I don't feel guilty that I walk him. Sometimes I get a little tired, but you know what? That's a part of my life now, and it changed quite recently.
Yeah, that's really great, because it speaks to a couple of things, which is, first of all, we all know inherently that our wellness and taking care of ourselves and walking more than 15,000 steps a day makes us better as leaders, right? It makes us stronger emotionally, physically, and able to do our job better. But we don't always do it. Right. And we get into these ruts, right? And so what gets us out of that? How do you kind of re-strategize, right? Buy a puppy. That's one. What else? Lisa, what else would you say about that?
Well, I have to confess, I also have a puppy. That's that is my primary source, probably, of the things that keep me grounded. There's nothing better than fur, I think, to do that. I would say I also have a very supportive husband, who is the guy that comes and knocks on my office door and says, "Hey, it's 5 o'clock. Don't you have an exercise class you've got to get to? Don't lose track of time," because I'm the worst for that. I notice, my exercise class started 15 minutes ago, and I ignored my alert. So putting those things at the forefront, I think, is important. I'm very, very careful about logging off on weekends, which is something I know a lot of female academics in particular struggle with. They think that's their research time. No, it is absolutely not. That is your family time. And being conscious, I think, of protecting our time. This goes back to that first question in some ways, Dana, I think, for early career academics in particular, is making sure that you're open and honest and assertive about your needs in the workplace as well, so that you can have that balance on the other side. And I'm going to give an example of that. And it goes back to, in some ways, to that, teaching classes in a semester. Because I don't have children, I was often called on to teach all the off-hours classes. So it was up to this female academic to make up for and support her other female academics who had to get home to their kids. And there was a 4-year period where I did not teach a single class inside traditional business hours. And if you want to talk about a strain on a marriage, right? There's a strain on a marriage because I was never home. So I finally brought it up. And it was women that were assigning me these courses, right?
Mhm.
I brought it up. I sent them a spreadsheet. They were like, oh my goodness, we didn't even realize it was entirely unconscious bias. And I think I didn't have to teach a course outside of hours for another 4 years to make up for it. So I think
That's
we
great.
just
That's
have to
great.
also be we have to advocate for ourselves as well. You know, to make sure that we are able to carve out that time. I think there's this myth that it's all up to us, right? And I know several of us have talked about executive coaches, right? Well, for most women, we're expected to go find a coach on our own, pay for a coach on our own. It's not the case for a lot of our male counterparts. They're actually being provided that as part of their professional packages. So we have to be conscious about how we are supporting our female colleagues on a variety of different levels.
Yeah, those are really, really excellent points. Thank you for that, Lisa. Rena, what would you add to those that discussion on balance and strategies?
So we just went through, I think, a couple of years post-COVID, COVID and then out of COVID, where if you're in the same position, the anecdote goes, you're significantly underpaid, right? Because there's been so much musical chairs going on and people jumping from one opportunity to the next that and I think we owe it to our younger generation who came back and said, do I really have to be at the office 5 days a week? And we all sit there and say, well, a lot of the non-formal business activity, that socializing, that pollination of ideas that happens in the corridor, or that light that goes off because you bumped into a colleague, can't really be done through this medium. So clearly there needs to be no extreme, right? The old 9 to 5, which we never had, by the way. As an investment banker, if I worked 9 to 5, they thought I had another full-time job somewhere else, right? Because it was at least 80 to 100-hour weeks, and we still do that. Like, I don't know that we don't do at least 60 to 80-hour weeks. If you count all the telling my son, hold on, let me just answer this email, or you take the dog out for a walk because I can't, right, to my partner. So these are things that you talk about and you say, how are we going to overcome that? Well, it starts and ends with us, right? So just like we get into these positions where we lead, we also need to establish stronger boundaries and expectations with our staff or higher ups and those that we supervise.
Thank you. That's great. That's great, Rena. Thank you for that. Those are really good insights. I picked up on the fact that you also have a dog, and I just want to mention I have 2 dogs as well. So that seems to be key and very critical here to our well-being. So I just want to turn over. We mentioned coaching in that previous discussion, and let's talk a little bit about coaching and mentorship and what role it has actually played in your career and can play in helping women overcome some of the challenges in higher education. Let me just start then with Allison.
Certainly. I'm glad that I joined the dog club by getting a puppy. And for me, it was, here you go, you've been talking about a puppy and now I have one. So I didn't go out and seek it. My house was not puppy proofed, but you know what? I've adapted. And I think that's also where, in terms of this question that we're a little shifting to, but not, Lisa talked about coaching and you know what? That was a game changer for me as well. That's the lifesaver. Actually, for me, having a coach is just an amazing opportunity because this is someone who looks at things through a different lens. And I talk to my coach once a month. Yes, this is time for me. And, I was so excited to hear and get to know Christina a little better because I think, the world of coaching has really opened my eyes to how you deal with things. I never really understood, about the choice maps and you choose by the moment and what is urgent and important. For me now, it's what's urgent, and important. Now I've got another layer there. So you have to prioritize. And, in terms of even that, you feel like you're taking on so much. Well, I've had to delegate more. And, that's been a key shift for me. because before I wanted to do it all, do it my way. I'll do it. I'll work. I'm a helper. I will help and do everything. Then you realize in roles of leadership, as I said before, we only have 24 hours a day. And I've stopped, I pause, I wait and say, you know what? No, my coach, I love analogies. We talk about a dance floor, the bus, we talk about so many different things. And I appreciate those conversations because it's the way you look at things. And so how do you cope with this burden of looking after students, faculty, staff, everybody? You also have to take care of, your family, your home responsibilities, but you also have to take care of yourself. And again, for me, I'd say the coach has definitely, again, been a lifesaver because that's for me to understand. And I talk about everything, and it seems like my time with my coach flies by because there's so much I want to say, but it's also in the intonation of when I'm really frustrated with something or I'm excited, and I want to talk about the smile file and I want to talk about things that are important to me. That's how I cope, because the burden can really get you down. But then who is there? And I would say, there are all lots of people that will help, but what is critical to my success have been those key people, in my life, and puppy.
I love it. Great. That's great. Wonderful. No, I think that this world of coaching is one that, all of us have probably touched on a little bit in our careers. And one of the things, I'm also a trained coach, and, one of the things I love about coaching is just that someone's giving you their time in a way that you never get, especially in our roles, right? People are knocking on our door, asking for our time quite a lot. And to have that gift of someone listening to you, it can bring such a great sense of relief and clarification, I think, in our day-to-day work. How about you, Lisa? You mentioned coaching earlier and just wondered about coaches and mentors in your life and how they've had an impact on your career.
Yeah, and I think everyone has the thing that works for them. And I think what I found is my peer network. So all of you meeting every couple of weeks, colleagues that I keep in touch with that are my sounding boards at a reasonably similar level. They're my coaches, for sure. And they're the ones that I draw my strength and my ideas from. And I was talking to one of them last night before this session, and I asked her a few of the questions, and I asked her, what are your thoughts on these things? And it was a great conversation, and it's a really great alternative way to feel supported. I think one of the other things I think about in terms of leadership and mentorship, though, again, knowing that we have some earlier career people on the line, is my job as a leader and as a mentor. And I realize I've been doing it even since I was an early career professional myself, and building those peer networks and supporting my colleagues. And it becomes more important, obviously, as we become higher. And now that I'm a dean, I find myself sharing, the good, the bad, and the ugly stories of, back in my day when I was you. And passing on those kinds of bits of advice in a way that is very informal. And I would say, in my experience, it's that informal mentorship and coaching and conversation that has made the most difference in some of my younger colleagues' careers. So I would encourage that peer networking and peer mentorship for anyone in this room is another really good way to get that advice and support.
That's great. No, thank you. So we have a few minutes left. I still want to stay on this theme just for another minute or two on the mentorship and coaching, because I wonder, Rena, maybe you could speak a little bit to what are the mechanisms you use to build that into the careers of those you are leading at the moment? I mean, how have you ensured that people are getting that mentorship and coaching when they need it?
So, the literature is pretty decided on this, that if you have a job posting, a male reading it will see, you know, and say, I could do this, even though they have about 50% roughly of the qualifications. And women need to, in their mental accounting, need to be like at 90% or something, to the point now that we actually see employment opportunities for leadership positions where the headhunter or whomever actually says, you know, please apply if you see yourself having about 70%, right, of what we list as required qualifications, right? So they're actually providing these guidelines, and that's intended for women. Right. So one of the biggest things that I have, you know, done throughout, unfortunately, my experience throughout my careers, right, and has been that, and I, you know, I hate to simplify into two buckets, but I have come across women who genuinely helped, who were true mentors, you know, part of the sisterhood that helps each other, right? And then there were some women who saw us as competition, right? Or if Rena gets it, it means that I have less chance, right? And of course, back then it may have been, you know, pretty narrow at the top for opportunities for women. So one of the things that I definitely, you know, make sure to point out to younger women aspiring for executive positions is apply, right? And have the same outlook as, I'm bright. So what I don't know now, I'm going to know. Just like any, you know, guy who says, I know I could walk the walk and talk the talk, even though I haven't done this before specifically. So it is to, you know, again, reach out as opposed to leaning in this time, and have and fight those feelings of imposter syndrome. You know, I think Lisa brought them up. We suffer from that disproportionately. And why is that, right? Because for a long time, we were questioned through subtle, you know, and hints and implicit biases. Our doors weren't opened for us, and we did have glass ceilings and all of those things. So yeah, that is probably one of the biggest things that I tell women, I would say in the 40-year range, right? Thank goodness. It's so refreshing to see, you know, the 20 and 30-year-old woman, in some instances being oblivious even to the fact that she can't apply for anything that a guy could do, right? Like it's wonderful, and we should all have that mindset.
That's wonderful. That's really great. It's a really good insight, right? This generational shift. And, you know, we see it from different lights. I mean, sometimes we're very positive about the strides we made. And I think on other days we think, did we make any strides? Are we any different? But if you look at that generation coming up, I think they are thinking about their opportunities in a very different way. And I think that can give us a lot of insight as to what has changed in the world around us, and what I guess our generation has started to change in the work that we're doing. You know, one thing about academia is that, you know, if you come into academia, you usually don't come in on a path to become an academic leader, right? That's not the path anyone tells you about, and there's not really a handbook to get there. So, I mean, what would you say to a woman in your organization at any age who's thinking, you know, got another 20, 30 years left of my career, and I'm not sure if it's teaching or research, and I want to explore leadership a little bit. What steps should they take? Who should they talk to? Lisa?
Yeah, I find it hilarious that you're asking me this question, Dana, because honestly, I feel like I've never made a single career choice in my entire life. My trajectory was so organic. You know, someone phoned and said, you should apply for a master's degree and we'll give you some funding. Oh, well, I don't have a job yet. I guess I will. Then someone called me up again and said, you should apply for a PhD. I said, I'm not falling for that twice. They said, but you could do it on a beach in Australia. I went, okay, maybe I'll apply for a PhD. It was one of our colleagues, Gina, who is the dean at my former university. She said, Lisa, you're kind of good at this leadership thing. Why don't you become a dean? Well, it never occurred to me, actually. So when it comes to thinking about these actual progressions and where you want to go, I mean, I'm probably the opposite in the advice that says, I think everything happens for a reason, and don't be shy about taking those fortuitous, serendipitous opportunities that come along. And, when they feel right, I think, So probably not the advice. I'm sure Rena probably has the exact opposite advice to me, because she's been a lot more deliberate in her steps. But.
Okay, Rena, then how about you? That's great, though. Thanks, Lisa.
Actually, no, the phone rings, right? And you answer. And I never say no to a headhunter, even though the position is not a good fit, because I always learn something, right? When they're interviewing you, their questions are leading. Their questions, point out what is currently, being sought out in a candidate. I mean, that is if that's not research, I don't know what is, right? Career research, which we should also be doing continuously. So I'm on the Lisa camp here. I am a truly accidental academic. I came in with my CV and said, I want to teach, an equity valuation course. That's what I came in to do. And now I'm the dean. Like, you can't get more accidental than that. And it was always because fix this or do that. And it's like, yeah, I have an idea I could put to work. And the other thing is bringing people together, right? We tend to do that differently. We tend to create a team. My staff giggle a lot. I see that as a sign of success, right? When staff are happy and faculty are at ease, right? Toxicity is something that is to be avoided. And golly, man, we went through heck, right, through COVID. Everybody is a little depressed and a little exhausted and a little fed up. So we had to fight back and claw back, and we all had those challenges. So yeah, no, don't say no, which is the exact opposite, right, of what you should do in other situations. I'm not talking about those situations. I'm talking about don't say no when it comes to opportunities and career. Talk and don't filter, and don't worry if it's a perfect fit with your qualifications, because these jobs are made in a way for us not to fail. Right? Don't forget, guys were doing them before us.
Great. Wonderful. Christina, I wondered if you want to jump in on that a little bit with the insight that you have from your current role and seeing women who are thinking about their careers in different ways.
I would love to, Donna, but we've got some questions from the audience.
Oh, do we? Okay.
We have 5 minutes. So if I just read one out, the first one so far, and if anybody would like to answer, well, let's see how many we can get through in the next 5 minutes. Yeah. So this question is, have any of you been in a situation where you look up to the senior roles that could be the next step in your career, but all the leaders are male and there seem to be no gaps, opportunities to move up to? What have you done? Anybody got any responses?
Change institution.
Yes, excellent.
Yeah, don't be afraid. Like, and we, we drive to work on autopilot, right? And we have our habits and etc. because we're human and it's normal, right, to resist change. But I assure you that nobody has, just a one way of doing things. And frankly, if there is that type of resistance to diversity at the top, that institution is probably stale. Do you really want to be there, right? Or do you want to be in an environment which is going to teach you? Like, I'm the perpetual student, right? If I'm not learning, it bugs me. So do you really want to be in a place that shuts you out because it's probably stayed and stale and a whole bunch of other things?
Lovely. I think we've got time for one last question before we wrap up. So it's this one. When considering being in this place of being one of the boys, do you think there is also an impact on country, culture, subject area, which impacts on how this looks in the workplace? Example, Dean of Health compared to computing or construction.
Ooh, good question. Anybody want to tackle that?
Anybody got a quick answer?
Well, I'll say I'm the Dean of Faculty of Management and the Interim Dean of Education. and the faculties are different. You know, you have to respect that in my role, I wear different hats, and it's perspective. So absolutely, you have to be very conscious of where you are and what you're doing. But that's why we have to rely on our mentors and, you know, our champions, and, you know, talk to others. You know, I was very fortunate growing up as youngest of a large family, and looking at my parents, my siblings, and now my VPA, of looking from different perspectives and from what everyone around me is dealing with as well. You learn as you go. And I think that's why I always say seize opportunities, because we can make a difference.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to you now, Dana, to wrap up.
Okay, all right. Well, let's this has gone very quickly because the conversation's been so interesting and dynamic. So thank you all for amazing contributions. And now is the time to perhaps wrap up, and I'm going to invite each of the panelists to provide a top tip from today's session. 30 seconds. Over to you, Lisa.
All right. Well, I think my 2 words are be bold. If you want to do it, you can do it. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, and you'll have a great career.
Wonderful. Allison.
I like that. I'm going to say, live your purpose and seize opportunities, because what's an opportunity lost?
Absolutely. Rena.
I say that there's always a gift and a lesson in everything, even in the darkest moment, right? That you look at that yin yang symbol with the dot of white and the dot of black, right? Learn your lessons. It makes you grow. The moment is difficult, but you're going to look back and you're going to be a better person because you've gone through it. And there's always a gift. Like, I haven't looked at a moment in my life where things were not going well that I didn't, right, at some point realize, hey, this is going to open up another door, or it's going to make me, you know, look at things differently. So gift and lesson.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. And Christina, anything from you?
I would say believe, and it is true, that you actually can make things happen for yourself. You don't have to wait to be asked. You don't have to wait to be noticed. Actually, we can all be far more proactive than we give ourselves credit for.
Really great advice. Wonderful pieces of advice from all of you. And I guess I would just end with my piece of advice, which is to seek support of other women. Forge those networks. If you don't have a network immediately available to you, make one. Because it can really give you that boost and give you that opportunity to think through those challenges, find the lessons, find the power that you need to succeed. So I just want to thank all of you. You've been absolutely brilliant. I hope the audience has enjoyed the conversation today and taken away some good pieces of advice. And thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay, shall I just finish off with, if you're looking for more information on any of the topics, please visit jobs.ac.uk /career advice and womenspace.co.uk. The recording of this webinar will be available next week on the Jobs.ac UK website. So if you'd like a recap on any of the topics covered, and please share it in your network, then go to the website. We will be getting information out to you on all of this, and follow us on social media. So I think, Dana, on behalf of both of us and Jobs AC UK and Women's Space, thank you, our dear audience, for tuning in, and our lovely panel, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks so much.